Call to order the Parishwide Drainage Liaison Committee Tuesday, October 11th. Roll call. Jessica.
Mr. Anderpont?
Here.
Mr. Bears? Mr. Brain?
Here.
President Landry?
Here.
Mr. McMillan?
Here.
Mr. White? And Chairman Scott.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I'd ask that anyone in the audience please silence all electronic devices, and if you'd like to speak on the item tonight, please fill out a blue slip in the back and get it up to Miss Jessica, and we'll give you your time. With that, we'll move to item number 3, receive report from staff regarding an update on the parish-wide drainage study authorized by the police jury. Mr. Beam.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. We appreciate the opportunity, as always, to come before you. Tonight, this is going to be the next meeting, or the latest meeting since August 25th, when you last met, wherein the staff proposed different items related to the drainage study, which we've all been involved with. What I'll do is, the first slide is actually, I want to go straight to the recommendations. We're going to come to that, but I wanted you to know what we're seeking tonight, just so we get that out from the start. And then we'll summarize where we've been, and of course answer any questions and get any input. They're really fairly basic, but they're important. The two recommendations, the first would be to adopt what we call the drainage policy framework. Again, all of this was presented on August 25th, so there's nothing really new here, but it's after a public comment period. And you do have a packet in front of you. That particular sheet, and we'll get to it later, is this one sheet in addition to your PowerPoint. This is what we're calling the policy framework, okay? And then the other item is we're seeking approval to move forward with the Drainage Coalition. It's a name we've put together for really a group of staff people at the parish, cities, and drainage districts who work on the drainage services, coordinating efforts on the things you see listed here, and it's basically any and everything that we need to work on for drainage. So we'll come back to this at the end, but we are seeking this approval from the committee to recommend to the full jury, which meets next Thursday, October the 20th. We want to go ahead and summarize not just the most recent public input period, but what we've done all along. And this is going to be a summary. So you've seen this before, but it's important that all along the way, we want to keep everybody up to date. And I'm going to cut, this goes back to actually last December. So we've been doing this a while, but we've had 3 open houses for the public. This is not counting your police jury or drainage committee meetings. Those were very well attended. From those and others along the way, we actually, in our 2 big public comment periods, 138. That is a lot for public input. One of the things that governments always struggle with is getting people involved on issues we know they care about. 138 are actual specific drainage issues on a neighborhood or street level. So you know there's a whole lot more out there that people maybe haven't made us aware of. So the problem is vast, and it is, you can tell by the folks that have talked to y'all and us how critical it is to them. And I want to thank one of our consultants, Emergent Method. They've really been great on this public outreach. We use citizenreach.com. We've used all sorts of technology and the old-fashioned way to reach people so that we get their feedback. 18 stakeholder focus groups. What does that mean? That's a lot of the groups that we know that are going to be interested and are possibly impacted by any decisions you make. And this is very intense, and it's taken a long time, but I think this is where government needs to be thorough to make sure you get all the input you can. And then, of course, many of you are involved with these. We've all along the way, mayors, city councils from the 6 municipalities, gravity drainage districts, Go Group members, very helpful. And, of course, social media, which these days you really need to use that in addition to your others. We've taken advantage of that as well. So what's our key takeaways? What did we learn? Well, we learned a lot, but if you take it from the big level, and then we kind of narrowed it down to 6 main points here. The first, we heard this time and again, and it sounds so obvious, but you really like it when people tell you directly and it means something to them. they're saying parish and cities and districts, and they were nice about it, but I don't know that they really care if it's a district or a parish or a city. Please look at this in the whole, coordinate your efforts, don't do it in a vacuum. So we definitely heard that. And although we have a large focus on looking at how we set standards for development when you build, that was accepted, and they're glad we're doing it. Glad y'all are looking at it as a police jury. But please don't forget about specific projects. And if you'll just kind of think about the map we've presented the last couple of meetings with tons of the dots, those represent actual people, actual homes, actual neighborhoods that will need some projects. So it's good to plan for the future, but they're saying don't forget about our current needs. Use science and engineering available to you, use best practices, but make sure you're taking how Calcasieu is, topography and everything else, where we are along the river, how does it affect Allen, how does it affect Beauregard, Calcasieu, Cameron, the whole bit. And be realistic about how to approach maintenance. So what does that mean? Heard a lot of good information. Don't forget about maintenance, which can, think about your vehicle. We all know we need to do it. There's certain intervals. We do need to improve and have some standards that are more consistent across the parish. I think everybody makes their best attempt to try to do the maintenance part, but there's some fundamental things we can do there. But we don't want to mislead anybody either, even if we did that perfectly. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the big piece. So for anybody who might think, well, if you just do a better job with street ditches and drainage laterals and cleaning them out regularly, you don't need to do all this stuff. That's not true. We need to do that better, but it's only a small piece of the puzzle. Second to last bullet, must use existing funding wisely. I think that's a euphemism for please don't call for a new tax. We, look, in public service, and everybody knows this, but there's always more demand than supply. I think Allen's developed, along with the cities and the districts, they've identified 40-plus projects. Maybe I'm low on that number. If you could do them all, the money's not there, but we're going to use what we have, and we'll cover that on a slide later, but that's not a piece of what we'll be recommending here. We got to use the things available to us, show some work, show some output, and go from there. And lastly, the effort must help sustain development, not hinder it. We recognize you need good economic growth and positive policies that are supportive of business. We are not interested any more than you in hindering growth. It's a good time to be here, but you want to do it in a way that recognizes what happens when you build, and let's be responsible for drainage when those things happen in a reasonable way, but one we can defend. Okay, key changes based on feedback. These are specific things that in our input sessions over the last almost year now, we heard a lot of. We went in with, we think, some good ideas, but as always, there's a lot of people who keep up with this too that made us look at it differently. We first came out and said we ought to set a standard for 100-year flood events. That's not a bad goal, but you got that trade-off, and we learned that, look, this is going to, especially on development, new development, that would be very costly. I mean, picture having to do detention ponds. It's different if you have to do it for 100-year flood event level versus 25, which is what we went down to. It's higher than what we have now because what we have now is wholly inadequate. So 25 is a big drop. Now, we'll be up front, and I don't want to try to become an engineer. I'm not one. But in talking with Alan, some of the other drainage engineers we deal with, what happened in the Baton Rouge, Denham Springs, that area, that was a 1,000-year flood event. So anything we propose here, if you passed it all, it won't prevent those kind of things. But you do have to prepare for something worse, but there's a level where cost comes into play. We also, if you think about, and Alan, I hope I get this right, I think it's the flood way, but picture any lateral or big ditch, if you'd like, and say, okay, it's not really a good idea to build in where nature has put a water collection channel, okay? And initially, we had that would be proposed, we would ask that you prohibit any construction in that within 100 feet on either side of the center line of a particular lateral, for example. Well, the more we thought about it, talked to others, we said, look, there's ways you can have, there's technical terms that I can't remember, but zero impact. If you can use what's available, there are creative and innovative ways. You can build there, but you got to meet the standards. We wouldn't just have a blanket prohibition. We want to let people build, but you got to meet certain standards that are, it's going to be harder. When you put fill into a floodway, that hurts your drainage. So we backed off of that, though. And then the end, we moved from a singular policy to one that balances long and short term. What that means is, we go in, as y'all have asked us to do, look at the big picture, look at 10, 20 years from now. How do you start planning for that? But we learned quickly, in addition to that, we have to address a lot of these things that, as we speak, are a problem. They're short-term or current, if you want to call them that, and we need to work closely to deal with those. So we're not just totally looking ahead at the expense of the people who have said, I got a problem today. So we've adjusted our sails. Okay. I'm not going to go through each of these policy items because it's too much detail, but I don't want to skip over something where we may have questions. Now, anybody who may want to bring these up later, if it's okay, we'd like to go through the presentation. We probably will come back to these, but what's on the screen, those 3 dashes, those match this sheet. If you'll just kind of pull your sheet out, called Policy Design Criteria. Those 3 on the screen match 1, 2, and 3 on your paper. As you can see, each one has about 5 or 6 items under it. Well, that's way too long to go through. It's what we handed out last time. Again, I'm not trying to rush you through it, but these are just fundamental policies. This has to do with what would be applied to new development. Now, the plan from here, if y'all approve this or recommend it to the police jury for approval, we want to use this as a jumping off spot with this drainage coalition that will take us to the last more detailed level of ordinances. We've learned from past initiatives. We didn't get great feedback when some folks maybe thought we went too far, had ordinances done real quick, and it looked like we had our minds made up, that kind of thing. We purposely are doing it at this level because this will be our go-by, though. So it's important, but it's not the final ordinance. We still need to work on that over the next 60 to 90 days, but that's what this item is. And again, Alan is here to explain any of those in there, and be glad to come back to that if you need to. So let's move on to the second part, the Drainage Coalition. I know on the screen this is a little harder to see, but I think each of you from your own seat can see it. What we've done here, and you've seen this graph before, this chart, the Drainage Coalition is at the top, and you can see it's kind of bracketed, and underneath it or within it, we want this group, and I'll get into who that is in the next slide, but you can divide all the things we've been doing over the past year or so into 2 main groups. One, how do you treat development? That is, in respect to drainage, when somebody builds and they're creating more impervious surfaces, how do we make sure they account for the drainage impact? So that's on the left. And you do that through your policies and ordinances, and that's what cities have to do too. And that's why they're saying, please work together. These ordinances don't have to be identical with the cities, but they need to be similar. You may have different issues depending on which city you're talking about. On the right, this is where the public agencies come into play. You, the districts, the cities, how do we do those projects? How do we prioritize them? How do we fund them over time? And make sure that we're doing that side of the equation. So that's, in general terms, that's the main 2 items. So what is the purpose of this coalition? As I mentioned earlier, we've used the term, they'd be the glue. So kind of picture, it's very simple in concept, but it's very important. The people at the staff level who provide drainage services, your public works folks, your planners, your engineers, your district superintendents at the districts, DOTD needs to be involved. They would meet regularly, beginning really the first week of November would be our plan, to go through these issues, because as far as we've come, the next few months, a lot of that work is going to need to be done to get to some of the final items. And so here's what we would say, generally speaking, we'd ask them to work on. During this transition period, again, going from policies to ordinances. Longer term, we think they need to be scheduled regularly, quarterly. So we make ourselves talk to each other. And by the way, we get along great and everything. It's just everybody's busy with their own thing. We got to make sure that they get together. And then we think it's important after you have a disaster. Doing assessments of drainage impact, and Alan and I were just talking this morning about North Carolina, which got hammered as bad or worse than Baton Rouge area following Hurricane Matthew. And it's just really tragic looking at that. We need to make sure we're all working together after those situations. I threw this back in. It was a good slide from last time to give you a sense of, so how do you approach this? So this is the sulfur area. It's just an example. We are hopeful that a lot of these that have been turned in that are maybe at an intersection or a street, we can actually do a few projects that actually address a lot of dots, if you will, at one time. For every dot on here, that represents a comment turned in about a drainage problem. Doesn't mean you have to do a project at every one of the dots. In some cases, you will. But that's good news. We think if, you look at that big picture and you can knock out a lot of those with fewer projects. So what's the next steps? I mentioned that we'd like to get the Drainage Coalition to start meeting first week in November. Start narrowing down the projects. This is on the capital side. Continue to get public feedback. By the way, all along the way, any mayors, council members, jurors, general public will have opportunities in meetings like this to make sure we're following what you asked us to do. We think spring 2017 on having a really solid project list that we can go to you with is when we can do this. That may seem like a while from here, but it's not really that long when you think about what we're trying to pull off. This hasn't been done before, and it's pretty big. So I'm about to wrap it up and certainly open it up to any comments or questions. I'll come back now to the same slide I started with. I won't repeat it all. I do want to wrap up before there's any questions or comments. I want to commend the cities and the drainage districts. We have met a lot with them, learned a lot about each other, and I don't want to speak for all of them, but as recent as over the past week, meetings with Sulphur and Lake Charles, a lot of their staffs, they've been very supportive, and if any of them, I know we have some here tonight, certainly would ask them if they want to come speak, but the direction we're heading, it is aligned with what they're hearing for their cities too. Now, the devil's always in the details, but that is encouraging because we're all going to have to come to the table with this. So I want to thank them for their efforts on that. And with it, I would ask if you'll allow me, if Alan wants to cover something I left out that's important, I certainly could have. And then other than that, I'm finished with my part, Mr. Chairman.
President Landry.
Let's let Alan speak. He may answer.
I'm fine.
He's ready to hear what you got to say.
Okay. All right. How much longer, and there again, not to rush things, but, we've been working on this a long time, and I'm ready to see some action. How long until is it going to take you to finish the ordinance part of it? Estimated. I know you're an engineer and that you don't like questions like that. So just give me an estimation. I won't hold you to it, but give us some kind of ideal. We looking at another 3 months possibly or longer?
So let me define finished, and then I'll help me answer the question.
Okay.
Mr. Landry. So finished in terms of what we would draft out, in terms of what we would recommend to the police jury, what we would recommend to you guys is one level of finished. Finished in terms of us going through the coalition and having the rest of the cities draft that similar version and get it accepted is another level of finish. But obviously, that's gonna be more complicated because we gotta blend it all together. But our draft of our ordinances and things that we wanna change, I really believe will be drafted and ready to show, you know, at the turn of the year, so first of the year. We probably got, 2 months of work to do. I have drafts of things that we've worked on, but it has moved around in terms of what we want to do or should do or can do. And, this meeting's gonna be our jumping off point to probably 2 months of putting a well thought out draft of the actual ordinances, and so that they would function, that you guys would see from a parish standpoint, and we would also be showing to the coalition to say, this is where we think we should be and how those ordinances would function. And can y'all write to them and reflect how development happens in your city, because how it happens in the city is a little different than the parish, and how do you tweak it for your needs?
Okay, I was under the impression that they were gonna begin to develop theirs along with ours, kind of in sequence.
So the first 2 months was not that we would be sitting in meetings doing nothing, but the first 2 months at those meetings, if you try to say, well, what will we be doing at these meetings? First off, we got the project list that we need to get out and get moving, that top 10 list, if you will, and get it prioritized. If we're able to get money into the budget this year from a project standpoint, we surely need the projects to get going. So we'll be doing that. But on the ordinance side, in terms of the coalition, some of the very first things I really would like to do is spend the first couple meetings talking about the big picture, honestly doing a little education on why we need to do these things and build some fundamentals in terms of how does regional detention work, why does it work, and finish up in the learning process of it all, and then be there discussing and sharing, how the ordinances would have to be worked. So as our drafts come on in terms of the finished writing, they will know the fundamentals that it's doing and how it works, and they'll be able to go back to their councils, their mayors, their people, and begin to sail and work through their process of matching us. So we're gonna have a lot to do in those first 2 months, but our draft, something that I would be probably really comfortable to give to you guys to say, this is what we think the parish should do. I think that draft will be here in 2 months.
Okay, so around the first of the year. Now, at that point, I'm sure you'll present it to us. We probably won't take any action on it at that time.
Absolutely.
And that'll give us all time to go over it. And after that, will we schedule meetings with the stakeholder groups once again to get feedback? I'm sure that is the plan, is it not?
Almost certainly, we're gonna need to flesh out some details at that level, the particulars. When we get down to pond size and how it impacts these developments, how does low impact development play into this? Especially the builders, the developers are really gonna wanna know how that works.
Right.
And quite frankly, I've had several meetings with developers in this last month, where it's not so much that they disagree with the things, they just want to understand how it's going to work, how fair will it be, and they need to get their head around the concepts. And they want their opportunity to give their subtle changes or how it'll work best for their business, and that's what I've been trying to listen to and work it all in.
Yeah, and I mean, and I'm sure there's some concern there. They don't want it to slow things down around
Absolutely.
here. And the people that I've talked to, I mean, they do understand that we can't continue to do things the way that we've been doing it, and it's going to be different. But different's not always bad. We can get there and it'll still be a good development, and come in within budget, and they're just going to do it hopefully in a different way. But thank you, Alan. I appreciate it.
Mr. Angelpon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a question, I have more of a point of clarification. There seems to be groups who are under the opinion that we're rushing through with this project that we've been working on for years. We've been working on this when Mark McMurray was administrator here at Calcasieu Parish. So I just want to kind of clear the air that there's been a lot of meetings over the years to come up with some kind of a formula to address the drainage, which we have done, to assume that we're ramrodding this thing and we're going to run it through right quick. We have opportunity after opportunity for public opinions to come here and share those opinions, and some of them have and some haven't, but the ones that I find the most who have taken the position that we're kind of running through these things are probably not even here tonight. So all I want to say is that this has been a slow process, a productive process, and we have come a long way, particularly in the last year, in addressing the issues, working with gravity drainage boards and the such. And I want to commend the committee, too, that was appointed by this body to look into the endeavors of the future as far as drainage goes. So that being said, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan, just one more question as far as the meeting with the other municipalities and cities. Are they pretty much a go with this, and what is their feel on it and their take on it? Are they going to be easy to be able to get their plan with our plan as close as possible?
Well, I'm certainly not going to speak for them, Mr. Brame, but I'll tell you, in my most honest opinion of what I think I've heard at all those meetings. I think we all agree we have a drainage problem.
Yes.
That's growing, that's getting worse. I don't think anyone wants their flooding to get worse. I really believe that the idea of not being able to dig our way out of this problem, digging ditches deeper and wider at the parish level is a feasible, suitable approach. And I think I get some agreement there, although there's some projects to do just that we need to do. I believe the cities realize they can't go change out all the pipes under their roads to make them bigger every time they need to be bigger. So I believe that the idea of regional detention as a strategy and holding back water in new development, treating it at the site, at the source where it's created, is about our last real solution, and I think they get that. They're coming around to realizing that's our best, most cost-effective solution. Where it gets real complex is how do you do that and to how much? In the cities especially, it's going to be, it's a tough thing to do. We have smaller lot development. It's a lot harder to get detention on those lots. I understand that, I get that, but that runoff counts just as much as anybody else's runoff. So I think we all agree we have to deal with runoff. We agree that the solution is more detention, along with some projects and things like that. But I think where it gets hard to say how comfortable are they with everything is no, until we get into these coalition meetings, and I think the staff people that we're talking about really work hard at finding ways to make this fit in each municipality, that there's an uncomfortness there that how is this going to work? How is it going to hurt our development? No one wants to hurt development, including myself. But so we need the result. Without the result of hurting development, I think they want that. And I think there's a little bit of apprehension as how are we going to get there? And so that's where I can't sit here and tell you that we're going to match up at the end of the day, because we need to respect that. We need to let them, we all need to continue to grow. And I think it's in that realm of how we get there that the next 90 days is really going to bear what we find out in terms of how far they are able to go with this entire strategy.
Okay. Would you think that the some of the things we have to work out, it would be the maintenance, the maintenance of the detention ponds and the fees? Would that be, is that still stuff we need to work out for the developers?
Yes, sir, although I think the maintenance of detention ponds is honestly just an easy one.
Okay.
We have not done it well up to this point. I've always been honest about that, but that's an easy one. It's really, we need to put these drainage features into an agreement. They need to be the general daily, weekly maintenance of mowing and things like that needs to be put into the homeowners associations that need to exist, and they need to stay there, and they need to work. They need to take care of that daily maintenance, and there needs to be a long-term maintenance program. And so I think we all agree that that pond can't be built in a manner such that it comes over to the government to operate, because we can't afford to run it. You don't want to run them that way. We're going to be busy enough running the regional detention ones. So that one's easy. The impact fees is tough because no one wants to pay more money for an old problem, a growing problem, and we get that. But the reality is there's going to be a trade-off for a certain amount of development, especially on the smaller end, are not going to be able to put a detention pond on that site because it just won't work. So when it comes to the impact fees, we're going to have to decide, do we ignore that development and accommodate it some other way, or do we apply an impact fee, which basically says it's a fee in lieu of detention? And the money goes to build off-site regional detentions. It's just that simple. It's money, and it's expensive, and it's a fee, and that's going to be very controversial when you get to that point. But it's a choice of, do we ignore mitigating that land that's going to get developed and we allow it to increase the flooding somewhere? Or do we try and deal with it in a rational method or in a way that everyone else is, and they go to this fee? I mean, we didn't invent it here. It's what everyone else does. It's a proven system of basically the users of the system help pay for it.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I cover something?
Is that all right, Mr. McMillan?
Well, I'd like
I'm
to
sorry,
say
Hal, I
one
didn't know
thing
you had
real
a question.
quick.
Go ahead.
I hope the people listen to Alan's dissertation and answers to those last two questions, because you can truly see the passion that this guy has for drainage in Calcasieu Parish. And he's speaking from the heart, and he's speaking on our behalf. I'm thrilled that we have a guy like this that's helping us with our parish issues in Calcasieu Parish. He takes it very, very seriously, as we all do. It's not going to be an easy fix at all, and it's not going to be one thing fixes all. We're going to have to tweak this as we move along. We understand that. I hope y'all understand that. But I just wanted to say thank you, Alan. Thank you for your passion. And you heard it in those last two questions. And he's studied this hard and studied it long, and we're going to keep studying it to get it right, as much as we can get it right before we present it to the cities, because it's a regional impact. It's the entire parish, and everybody's got to have buy-in. So we're excited about what we're doing here, so we can work with the cities in the future and move forward with our drainage issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
All
Hal.
right, Mr. Beam, go ahead.
Thank you. Excuse me, Hal. I overlooked this slide earlier. I apologize. Funding, which Alan touched on, of course, this is an issue that's come up in most of our meetings. You have to talk about it. And I just want to briefly highlight it. Again, this was all presented back in August, but just to refresh everybody, you got to prioritize the projects, obviously, but so where's the funding coming from? And the details have to be worked out. Hal's exactly right. But we would utilize a portion of your existing road and drainage property tax. You do that a little already with the Road and Drainage Trust Fund. This would be the whole tax, though, excuse me. And we would phase in more use of that for drainage. Also, let's use an example. Let's say there was a project in Ward 3, which is the Lake Charles area and south of Lake Charles. The more we can do that in that particular drainage district, and possibly the city of Lake Charles in that instance, if they could put up matching funds to help, we would look to do that too. So when you see listed on here a portion of gravity drainage district taxes, that would be up to them, obviously, but if we all chip in, we can make it go further. State and federal grants, we don't expect there to be a ton of money there, but you always want to go after it if it's there. And you never know what may happen. You got to be ready, though, if the money does come. And then, of course, Alan mentioned the drainage impact fee. There will be a lot more discussions. There's nothing in our recommendations today or for next week that's going to ask y'all to pass a fee structure. We're not there yet. But the concept of it is, and we need you to go ahead to look at it, and I think Alan nailed it. We're sharing the costs over the whole parish. We're not putting all this on new development. Please understand that. And we can go in further depending on what questions may come up. But I just didn't want to leave this slide out. Thank you.
Mr. Landry.
I'll just make a comment, and this may not be the case every time, but there's a lot of developers, especially inside the city, when they're faced with detention, and they may be doing apartments or what have you. You know, there's a cost in that detention. And if they could pay an impact fee instead, a lot of them would rather do that, because then they get more units, and they're going to actually come out and make more money on the project, you know, long-term. So it's not always a bad thing, and of course, believe me, they'll probably, I'll be proven wrong, I'm sure, and given a lot of examples where, hey, we don't want to pay the fee, but sometimes it's better than the alternative. So, and I know we're not there yet, but I'm sure that when it comes down to it, that's going to be an issue. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to that, Mr. Wainwright?
I'm good. Thank you,
Good.
sir.
All right, if it's all right with the committee, I do have a couple quick questions. I'd like to, when we start talking about the coalition and the 2 months that we're going to be taking drafting this, you're going to be having these meetings before our draft, so we kind of get an idea of what or are you just going to draft the next couple months and then start the coalition meetings? Can you kind of clarify that for me?
Well, I know Dana will appreciate this, but we haven't set our ideas 100%. But I see in this first 2 months, if I have my rathers, and we're still imagining how this is going to work, but in the first 2 months, and especially in the first month, I really would almost like to think of it as some mini drainage retreats to some degree, Dennis, to where we're going to have to get together and go through these issues in detail. We're going to have to understand each other's pros and cons and what we think we can and can't do. So in those meetings, we're going to both learn, we're going to catch up. Believe it or not, you wouldn't think it's the case, but we're going to catch up on learning what each of us do, what we think we do, what we think we should be doing, where we all fall short, or what we're doing great. And from there, you will end up, you know, developing this glue that needs to happen so that we all work together. So I think, like I say, our draft's going to be coming along. It's going to be presented in pre-draft form at those sessions, if you would, and it'll continue to evolve. And like I say, for your version, I'd like to think that at that January level, we'll have ours, because let's face it, I have a pretty solid set of where I think we need to go, and so that's going to be pretty easy to get to. But what has not happened is explaining and sharing all that at the in-depth level to those at that staff level, that's where they can really believe it, understand it, and know how it's going to apply to their areas.
All right, and following up with the coalition, I know you can't speak to what you think they will or won't do, but you can speak to how have they received being this coalition? Is this something that they are willing to do as far as the coalition goes?
I've heard no one say they wouldn't want to be a part of the coalition. So I think what I like about it is sort of informal, and it has the right people at the table who are really the ones who are going to know their areas as good as anybody's going to know them. I look forward to working with that group of people. And, you know, I'm sure I'm going to learn as much as anybody in those sessions. Although I may be the one in front of the podium, I'm probably going to learn the most.
Well, you know, I think the people of Calcasieu Parish deserve what they have asked for. That is for everyone to work together. You know, it is a regional effort, and so I think that's a big step forward, and I think they would applaud that effort. When you start talking about projects, and we talk about 40 projects, when you deal with the Corps of Engineers, and I hate to, you know, pour us into that, but we are the government, and sometimes we get lumped into that. Some of the things we want to do, when we start doing projects against watershed versus volume, how are we going to make sure that all these projects we start doing don't become part of a bigger problem somewhere else? Can you speak to that briefly? Because the last thing I want to do is flush my water to the next guy like neighbors do to neighbors. We want to make sure that we're very well thought out and make sure that our science does work and that our engineering's on top of the game.
So you know how that question has a lot of answer to it. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. At the real local level, in our watersheds, that sort of start and stop here. Your stormwater department and the role that we feel like we're taking on in terms of the overall parish mission is to finished modeling out and have well-established models and computers and things like that, so that we know that when we offer up a project, that it doesn't have that negative backside effect that you're talking about, that it truly does have a net positive effect for the entire watershed that it happens to be in. And so at a local level, which is big, it's Calcasieu Parish, we're gonna have our blinders on and we're gonna be working in that regard. But at the same time, we have to be very mindful of our policies here at Calcasieu Parish, what they do to Cameron. We also need to get our head up and look and see what Beauregard and those guys are doing to us, or will be doing to us over the next 20 to 30 years as they experience growth. And they're going to experience even more. So we have to work on all these fronts. That's what I like about the team and the coalition part of it. We'll have opportunities to sort of understand the whole situation and put together the right groups to go kind of work on all these different fronts at the right time. So we don't want to build that project that just seems to kick it downstream either at the local level or the more Calcasieu Parish, Calcasieu River estuary level either. So we have to work on all those fronts.
And briefly, we will follow the same rules we're asking the developers and residents to follow. Our projects that we do in this parish will be to that same standard, if not higher, correct?
That has been our intention and would be our intention to try and do the same things. We're already putting it into projects. It's going to help us understand how it all works too, and I'm sure we're going to learn over time how to, it's going to, by using it yourself, you're going to learn the good and the bad.
Thank you. And following up on Mr. Andrew Ponce talking about us rushing this through, Mr. Beam, have we ever in recent history covered an issue this comprehensive as far as collaborating, where are we at as far as this issue when it comes to working?
By far, this has been the most comprehensive, and we learn from experience. And I give credit to our citizens, what we call our stakeholder groups. Just a side note, Dennis, because it's a good question. Much of the time, you want government to run like business. You hear that a lot. Be efficient, be effective. One of the main differences, though, is that you as elected leaders are expected to get a good understanding from the public and what they're thinking when you make policies. Businesses can choose to do that or not at their own peril. You are expected to. So by its nature, it should take longer. Should it take forever? No. And we're in the boat with you. We feel like you're ready and we're ready to have some things start happening, but I feel very strong in saying this is the furthest you have ever authorized, and we conducted what's called public engagement. And we're very humbled, to be honest, to be reminded how many good ideas are out there that if we hadn't done it, we would have never heard.
All right, thank you, and I'll just finish up with saying, we do hear a lot about development, my neighborhood, my ditch, We have to weigh development against concern and reality. And the reality we're in is it's going to take something a lot stronger than we've done before. And it's nothing that we've invented. You can go all across the Gulf Coast, up the East Coast, to Great Lakes, wherever you want to go. This is an issue that we'll all face. And what we fix this year is going to take more the year after that and the more after that, because whether you believe it or not, things are changing in this environment. And it's going to take a lot of fortitude, and it's going to take a lot of resiliency in the things that we do. It's probably going to be a different country in 20 years, honestly, the way we have to adapt the way we do things. So I'm just glad we're tackling this issue now. People are ready for it, and that's where we're at. Thank you. Mr. McMillan, did you have?
Well, no, they were just, the coalition, and it basically kind of just reviewing that one time, who is the coalition, and it's, of course, in here in our notes, but for the folks there was a lot of information covered. As proposed, includes staff representatives from the parish, cities, and gravity drainage districts, and basically whoever we might need to help us solve these drainage questions that we'll have in the future. We've got speakers.
We do have a Couple speakers on this, Miss Mary Kay Eason. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Mary Kay Eason, and I live at 3130 St. Andrews Drive in Lake Charles. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm really proud of our parish and the growth that we're experiencing. We know that economically we're the fastest growing region in our state and one of the fastest growing in the country. And this growth is great for our community, but it also requires us to be very smart and very proactive in planning how that growth will take place. And really, after listening to the comments tonight, I never thought I would say that I'm excited about drainage, but I am excited about a drainage initiative because I feel like for the first time that we've got a really strong handle on drainage. Thanks a lot to Alan and staff, but also thanks to the comments that from you guys. I can see that you know what we're up against, you know what we've got to do to get something done and to manage this in a proactive, comprehensive way. As a member of the Southwest Louisiana Task Force for Growth and Opportunity, otherwise known as the GO Group, I've had the opportunity over the last year and a half to work with other community and civic leaders on a volunteer basis to help ensure that our parish is prepared, well prepared, to embrace the opportunities that come with tremendous growth. And this includes working to minimize negative impacts such as flooding. I'm with you, Chris. I've been one of those going, well, we've been working on this for a year. Can we do something? You know, when are we going to do something? So, but it's a long process. It's tedious. There are a lot of moving parts. And as Hal said, it's going to require a lot of coordination and cooperation parish-wide among all government entities, different groups, and so forth. So one thing that I've learned over the past year and a half about drainage is that there is no silver bullet. There's no quick fix. There's no magic wand. And Francis, as you said, it's been something that's been worked on for a long time. It's just that recently it's come, you know, to the public in a strong way, and they feel like we're maybe hurrying it up. But there's been a lot of homework done to get to the point where we are today. The plans proposed by our parish leaders are targeted at addressing both short-term and long-term needs. It's been more than 10 years since we made substantial changes to our drainage policies, and of course a lot has changed in the last 10 years. It's going to change even more in the next 10 years. There's never been a better time, there's never been a greater need to put solutions in place to reduce our flooding and protect our communities for years to come. I'm grateful and appreciative for the support that I hear and sense from the police jury. We are dependent on our police jurors as an elected body representing the entire parish of Calcasieu to take a leadership role in this initiative, and I feel like you're doing that, so thank you very much for that. I feel like that's the only way that it's really going to move forward as quickly as possible, even though it seems slow. So I'm here tonight really just to offer my support, and I was planning to ask you to join me, but I feel like you already joined me in supporting the programs and the policies that are being proposed. We understand that it's a moving target. As Hal said, it's going to be tweaked along the way. As Alan mentioned, we're going to learn what we need to do better as we implement those policies on our own projects. But I'm convinced that the overall path going forward is to build a stronger, smarter future for Calcasieu Parish by developing this comprehensive drainage management plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. David Richard. Name and address, please.
David Richard, 7551 Harris Road, Bell City, Louisiana. I feel like I'm at the Mutual Admiration Society here between the jurors and your staff. So I'll get that out of the way. Brian, that's no 1,000-year flood that you saw in Amite or North Carolina or Lake Charles in 1981 or the Mermentau Basin in 1941 or the last floods that we've had would have been in the BC time mode. These floods that are called 1,000-year floods are more frequently on a 50-year schedule. If you will look at the rain records, Amite actually had more rain in 1961 than they had here in this last flood. So we have had lots of changes. I want to commend your effort. I want to commend your effort in trying to do things. I have written my deficiencies. I know, Dennis, that you have seen them. Brian has answered them. Alan has reviewed them. And I ask that you take those into consideration. There are so many unknowns, and I know that Mr. Anderpont said we've been working on this for 10 years, and I commend what you're doing. I noticed that one of the slides that wasn't shown tonight, that was shown in our public meeting, shows the areas of concern. And I also noticed, Alan, sidestepping the question in regard to cities' buy-in. The major parts of concern in Calcasieu Parish have been in the cities, and I think you desperately need those cities' buy-in in this project. And we have not seen that in stakeholder meetings. We have not seen those representatives in stakeholder meetings. I'm sure you've had stakeholder meetings with just the cities. And that's fine, but we have not seen or heard of their comments. And I don't suspect, maybe we have some here tonight, but I don't know of them. I do think, in spite of what Mr. Anderpont said, that there are so many unknowns in here that we have not seen enough detail from a public or development standpoint to make those decisions. I also see that, you weren't told tonight what those impact fees are. There's going to have to be some real individual efforts in regard to certain subdivisions in certain areas to keep from penalizing someone that designs a subdivision in a correct way from paying for the drainage problems of the past. And that is part of what I see here. And that's just the blunt fact of the matter. You've got some lots that are out there that have approved drainage plans at this point in time, and now you're going to propose to have a fee on them. The overreaching issue that I see is that we're going to pass this, I suspect you are, in regard to doing this coalition. You have no private representation on that coalition. You are affecting those developers and those realtors and those landowners in regard to this, and I just think that there should be some representation there. When you go from policies to ordinances, that's an issue that causes a problem that we don't know what those ordinances will be. I don't know what the costs are going to be. You said you didn't want a new tax, Brian, and well, what do you want to call a fee? I mean, that's going to be a tax. I do not want to be in opposition at all. I am not up here to be opposed to what you're saying. I just want clarification. We have so many unknowns. I put that in a letter to you. I put it in writing to you. I'd like you. Brian did answer it. He answered it in a way that I think is appropriate, but it did not have the specifics that I think we need in the future. And like I said, I commend what you do, but I think we need some serious buy-in that we've not been seeing. Hal, you look like you need to tell me something.
Yeah,
I can tell by your face.
I love this.
Go
I
ahead,
love
Mr.
this
Binkler.
where the example is public work directors, planners, superintendent, DOT, as others as needed.
Yeah.
I know you're busy, and I know you got a lot of the irons in the fire, but your wealth of knowledge would be truly needed in this
I'm not
coalition.
looking for a job, Hal.
I know you're not, but we need guys like you, Dave.
I'm not looking for a job, as you know. But I will tell you, I think that there needs to be private representation.
And I agree.
Okay, thank you. And I also agree that there's got to be some way. I mean, quite frankly, we're working on a large development right now that's not going to affect anybody else other than where that development's going to be. So should I be in the same place as someone that's going to be developing in a lower area in Lake Charles that has drainage issues at this point in time, and that my impact fees pay for their drainage problem, an existing drainage problem? And Alan showed the existing drainage problem in our meetings around McNeese Street. I just think that there has got to be some differentiation here and some common sense. And Brian did say that in his letter back to me. in regard to some common sense solutions that need to be on an individual and case-by-case basis. And I mean, I look forward to it. I mean, we're gonna have to look at ordinances, and there's a lot of other people gonna have to look at ordinances, and I commend yourself for working toward the future and looking toward the future. Brian is right. We get a rain like we had in 1940, or that you had here in 1981 or 80, or what we had just had in the Mermentau Basin here. All of this is mute. This is a mute point. It's going to flood because we're such a flat country. But
Well, I hope you will consider it. I know your time is you're a very busy man like the rest of us, but you've got a wealth of knowledge. And even if you could give us some of it, David,
I would be glad to give you whatever I can.
Yeah.
And I just ask that you take this in a way where you're not going to punish people that do it correctly and that want to do it correctly and do not want to impose drainage problems on anybody else because of their new development, and then not impose things on places where we've already had drainage studies done, where we're not going to do this and then charge them. I understand your point, Chris, in regard to some people might want to do that. But some of the fees that were talked to us, Alan, you correct me. Would you give me a range of those fees that you said on a per square foot basis?
The fee range that I've given is from 10 cents to $2 per square foot. So
I'm going to do a little calculating for
Of
you.
impervious.
That,
for impervious surface, yes.
yeah, on a per acre basis on a parking lot, that's about $86,000 an acre. So that's not including your land cost or your concrete cost. So I just want to make sure that and that's the high end.
Yes, sir, that is the high end.
That's
It could
the high
also be
end.
4,000, so it could, either one.
So that needs to be taken into effect. Those of us that have to, that look at the economics of development, I want to make sure you understand. I noticed you didn't put those numbers in your letter back to me, Brian. But to understand what kind of dollar figures we're talking about here, and that you all understand that from a development standpoint. And I don't want to belabor the points.
Mr. Wainwright.
So just on that, I do not want to get into the impact fee money game tonight, but just to put in perspective the reason why it's important, and the amount is going to be important. Don't disagree with that. But at $4,000, if you build a parking lot somewhere and you need to mitigate the runoff from an acre of parking lot, you can't do it for $4,000 on that site. So at that level, that's a bargain to mitigate that runoff. At $80,000, you probably can, right? So the threshold is somewhere in the middle of that. And again, it's about not necessarily just carte blanche charging a fee. It's a fee in lieu of detention when they can't provide their own detention a cheaper way. And, so remember, it's always in a secondary position in terms of our I guess our preferred method would be on-site detention. That comes with its pros and cons too, but if you can't do it on-site, you need to have an alternative.
David, I know I still have the floor moment. What would it cost
He's
on a
still-
per acre
He's still-
price to mitigate acre? What's it land?
$30,000 for wetland.
Uh,
$30,000 for wetland acre right now. You're going to build, create marsh, you're in the $100,000 an acre range. That's one of the issues you're going to be thinking about in detention here. Whenever you're going to do detention ponds, are you going to be taking out vegetated wetlands and having to buy mitigation to put in your detention pond? I mean, you skirted that point, but I want to make sure you understood that, Dennis, is that is a distinct possibility on some of the areas where you may need detention. I want to make this point again, is that in some places, detention amounts may be different because of the topography in that particular area. Where you've got topography that allows for some drainage and you've got some relief and you have some elevation, your detention is going to be much less in those areas than it's going to be in areas that are flat and you can't move that water out of there. I just think there needs to be some reason and not some just cookie cutter. You see where I'm going with this. It's not a cookie cutter type ordinance that's passed that's going to affect the entire parish, because you've got completely different things in DeQuincy and Iowa, Vinton and Lake Charles and Sulphur and Westlake and Carlos, and that it needs to be flexible and it needs to be available to be changed as per the parameters in that particular area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Landry, do you have questions specifically for Mr.
Maybe,
Reeshaw?
but a comment. Mr. Reeshaw, you know, you mentioned, okay, you're working on a project right now, a large project. It's on some property I'm sure that you own, and you said it wasn't gonna have an effect. So you've got enough property there. When you get done with that project, the runoff is gonna be running off at the same rate it was prior to the development. I'm assuming that that's what you're talking about. In that scenario, he wouldn't pay an impact fee because he's not creating an impact. So you're not impacting. You're handling it all yourself. It's a good project, so you wouldn't pay anything on that fee. That's how I understand it.
If the ordinance is written that way, you're exactly correct, because we want to design it that way. We want to design it where we're not going to impact any one of our neighbors. And I'm not saying it's on our own property, so we better move past that one.
well,
That's okay. That's
I
okay.
made an assumption.
I understand.
But while I was saying that, Alan was shaking his head yes, so I think we're all on the same page on that. We would not expect someone to,
Thank you, Alan, if that's the case, because that's what one of our fears is.
Well, like I said, I think what I said, we prefer on-site detention, i.e. make your site neutral once you build it to runoff, a neutral situation. So the impact fee is only going to be used, in my mind, at least where we start, is that in lieu of detention, when you have no other option, a feasible option.
Right.
Where we can attempt to try and mitigate that land through regional detention ponds at a cost-effective way, and at a much cheaper cost per square foot than you would have to do it on your site. I don't necessarily want to open up drainage impact banks,
Right.
but I need another option to mitigate that runoff. I mean, we need it.
Alan, one of the issues here is I want to make sure we're all clear on, is that on a development that I may be doing, I may not need detention ponds. I may not need detention ponds even if I do put in impervious surface that is not going to affect anyone else's drainage. So, I mean, I just think that needs to be taken into account also.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Reeshaw.
And we agree.
Let's,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Landry first, are you finished?
no, I think I'm good. I just wanted to make
You have a
sure that we
question
were
for Mr.
clear on
Reeshaw?
that, and Mr. Beam wants to speak.
Thank you.
Have Mr. Andrepont, go ahead.
If I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that you want transparency in the ordinance, where
Absolutely.
everybody interprets the language the same way. You don't want to say, well, I assumed it was this way, and he comes along and said, no, it's this way. Everybody on the same page, am I right?
That is absolutely correct. And public input into that ordinance so that we can see exactly where that's going to go in particular situations. And you know, one of the things I asked for in my letter to you was transparency in your
I
current
read
budget.
your letter.
Sir, I'm sorry.
I read your letters.
Okay. I asked for transparency in the current budget, which we did not get an answer on. It just says that, you know, we're going to budget this for the future in capital projects, et cetera, et cetera. And look, I'm not distrusting anyone, but if you're going to be transparent, show me the dollars that you're spending. Tell us what you got to spend. Tell us what we can spend. Tell us what you've been spending. Tell us, you know, be transparent.
Yeah.
So.
Well, your points are valid,
Thank you.
and I can assure you that the committee will work diligently with staff. And at the end of the day, we hope when we finish the final product that you're going to be happy with what we achieved.
I want to be happy, and I commend your efforts to get something done. Dennis is very active with us in the coastal sections of the state. He understands subsidence. He understands rising sea level. And I will tell you that everything you do, wherever far upstream you are, if you're in Alexandria or if you're in Shreveport, or if you're actually in northeast Texas, you're affecting what goes on in Calcasieu Parish. And Dennis knows that is one of my passions in regard to making sure that upstream and downstream are coordinated. It is not coordinated in this state at this point in time. We are in desperate need of that so that people understand where the flooding comes from. People in Jeff Davis Parish don't think that flooding comes from Cameron. It's coming from Ville Platte. You need to, you have to understand where that flooding is coming from. So an integrated approach, and you brought it up, Alan. We need to know what's going on in Jeff Davis and Beauregard and Allen. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Richard. Mr. Beam?
I just want to try to answer some of David's questions. I thank David for coming to the meetings, and we've had some good things on the Corps of Engineer issue, the wetlands. That's a big one. We we want to make sure that we get every ounce of benefit, or the landowners do, for a particular project toward that can be used. Those same wetlands can be used for drainage, and the Corps does allow credits for that. We got to pin them down on it. But David makes some good points. There's no question. But I feel like we need to clarify. It says the costs are unknown, the ordinance is unknown, the budget unknown, or maybe we skipped something or left it out. The reason we're doing it this way, there's no drainage fee talked about tonight because we don't know what it is. There's no ordinances presented tonight because we need the input to get them. So it's a chicken and egg. So I think we agree on that point. I hope so, that we need to do all those things. And the coalition, by the way, it's a fancy name, but it's really a group of staff people from the entities to get together and then bring in people like David, like we have already. The good news is we've got great people that have already been coming. We're going to pull them back in. So absolutely, it's already been transparent. It will continue to be. Regarding the budget, the reason we're not hiding anything. We have a budget this year of, I believe it's $2 million. That was to get started with the drainage department and if we had any projects. But we've been very clear in all these meetings. 2017 was going to be the first budget year for what we're calling capital projects prioritized. Do we have that yet? We present our budget to you in November. I think it will be more than $2 million. I can't say yet what it'll be. So it's just the information isn't there. We're not skipping over it. We still need to get it to you. We're purposely going in steps so we don't jump to something that people feel like we left them out. And so I hope that clears it up a little bit. I do thank David for his letter with a lot of questions. We did send it to each of you on the committee and our response, so that you certainly, if you have any questions on how we answer it, we'd be glad to try to clarify anything.
Thank you, Mr. Beam. Before we take a recommendation from the committee, I would like to recognize that we do have Mayor Ponche from my way, Mayor Hardy from Westlake, and from the city engineer from Sulphur, Mr. Daigle. So we do have representation from various municipalities here tonight, and we do appreciate that moving forward.
I'd make a motion that we accept the staff recommendations and move forward.
I have a motion and a second to accept the recommendations. Do I have any objections? Any other discussion? That motion passes. Any other matters before the committee?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Thanks for coming.